Hi, everyone. Welcome to the DesuckifyWork Podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Judy Cirullo, an executive and team coach with a focus on leadership and culture. We talk about navigating hybrid work environments and making sure those critical human connections can be formed, nurtured, and deepened through conversation, which led us to something called conversational intelligence, which may be one of my favorite new phrases. Look it up. It's a delightful rabbit hole that I have not fully emerged from yet. From there, we dive into culture and how it must be operationalized every day, not simply talked about on the company website or during quarterly team meetings. A great example, ditch the old school job descriptions that have been cut and pasted into irrelevance over the years and move towards what Judy calls a role descriptor, which puts each role into the context of a company's values and provides clear commitments around how to bring those values to life each day. Personally, I found a ton of value in what Judy brought to this conversation, and I think you will too. Okay, Judy Cirullo, welcome to the DesuckifyWork Podcast.
Glad to be here. Excited.
Really glad to have you here. I think we'll get into some fun stuff today. And before we go too deep, I want to just give you a chance to let people know who you are. You know, what are you doing these days for work, and how did you come to be doing it?
Boy, I'm actually specifically an executive and team culture coach.
Mm-hmm.
So my whole framework is around a people first culture.
Okay.
So I basically work with small to medium-sized businesses that, and I work with the owners, their leadership team, if they have one, and their teams, because that they need to have an infrastructure and system that supports people. Most businesses have infrastructure to support the operations and the admin, but they don't have systems in place to support the growth and development of their people, which leads to better accountabilities, better retention, those kinds of things. How I got here, 40 years plus clinician, 4-time practice owner in 4 different states, had the trials and tribulations of building, developing, retaining teams, made lots of mistakes, lots of headwinds, went back to coaching school in 2015 because I wanted to be able to learn how to release solving everybody's problems, but help them grow and develop themselves. Because people in healthcare, I work specifically with healthcare, dental, and other medical businesses.
Okay.
And so these teams really have a lot of trouble navigating the waters of people retention and culture and those things. So that's really where my sweet spot is. And it's because I've been there, done that, and want to help people have those pieces in place that I didn't have until, 3 decades through my business, thinking, there's something else that needs to be done here.
I know. It often takes like many trips around the, getting beat up a little bit by process until you finally, the light bulb goes off and you're like, man, we could really solve this a lot quicker. And I love that. And I think we'll get a chance to dig into a lot of what you're doing there, but in the healthcare space. And I really love that notion of infrastructure around people. And that's something I think we'll get into too. But before we dive too much deeper, one question I like to ask people is, what's your point of view on the state of work right now? And it might be through the lens of the folks you work with, but how do you feel if there's a suck meter of how people are feeling about work? Where do you think we're on right now?
Yeah, I love that question. And here's why. I think to a certain extent, the hybrid workspace is going to remain. Whatever it looks like, I don't know. Now, when you're in healthcare, dental, service oriented, you can't work from home unless you do telehealth.
Exactly.
But if we step back and even look further, one of the biggest dilemmas that employers have with our current situation is people think they want to be at home more. Okay. But what's happening is human beings are hardwired to connect.
Mm-hmm.
And when we aren't in an environment where we connect regularly, it doesn't have to be 5 days a week, but if we aren't connecting, we're missing something. And you're seeing that in the mental, physical, emotional well-being of people.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I think hybrid is here to stay. It's what it looks like for people outside of, but they need to come in and be connected.
Mm-hmm.
They need to share. They need to talk. They need to converse. They need to not look through the Zoom camera.
Mm.
Because that type of interaction is so much more meaningful and to their well-being, but to the business well-being.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've been somebody who's generally pretty pro remote, but I think it's not as intuitive how to make that work for some people. And I think you do have to, if you're going to be fully or mostly remote, you have to find ways for people to connect, and you have to build infrastructure around that. And then I think if you do a hybrid setup, I think the challenge can be what some people might find is, I show up to the office, and this might not be so much true in the medical space, and then they show up, and then that day, all they do is have their headphones on and they're just working and trying not to be distracted. So you have to be a little more careful about how you design the workspace and design the work day and give people the opportunities to have that connection and collaboration when they're in the office, and use the home time for the focus stuff, which can be really great,
Yes.
Have you encountered that at all in your work?
Absolutely. And, I'm mostly remote, as a coach, we're remote.
We are. Yeah.
But do I love to go into the office and interact? 100%.
Mm-hmm.
The change in the dynamics with the teams and the energy is just so much different, but it doesn't always allow us to do that, And so, it's a very challenging balance to make. And I think you hit on something very important, TJ, is that when you go into the office, you've got to set it up so that it encourages interaction, communication, conversation, and the focus, non-distraction stuff can be, hopefully saved for a different environment. Doesn't mean you're going to interact all day in the office, but it changes the energy, it changes the mindset, it changes the mental well-being, and it impacts what happens in our brain.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's such a big part of work these days, is thinking about the emotional, mental health side of things, and remote or not, I think COVID sort of just disrupted everything for people, and probably more so than ever in the healthcare space. I mean, because whether you were dealing directly with COVID or you were simply dealing with the fact that COVID just had tremendous disruption to the way you needed to work. What have you seen as people have come on the other side of that a bit? How are people thriving through all of that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it changed, unfortunately, the way COVID was handled, encouraged fear among people.
Yeah.
So people are fearful, and they have no reason to be. And but especially some of the younger people. And what I saw, because I coached the teams I was coaching, I coached them through COVID because they were all remote. They were all at home. And so they were like, what do we do? How do we? No one had been faced with this before, and no one knew how to navigate it, especially the owners. Yeah. So keeping them together and helping them understand what was happening, why, and the importance of regular interactions so that they could stay connected. And so that's a huge challenge. But coming out on the other end, people are really happy to be back together again, but there's still that fear.
Yeah,
and
it's tough.
It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because it's been pushed in, and you need to live your life.
Well, yeah, and I think from a mental health perspective, and not that coaching is specifically dealing with mental health, but I do think some of the best parts of coaching will connect to elements you might find in things like cognitive behavioral therapy, which is really driven by things like trying not to catastrophize, trying not to sort of see the worst possibility. And listen, it's natural to hear lots of messages coming at you and be afraid. The question is now, what do we do? How do we live in that? How do we figure out what our best path forward is? And I feel like as coaches, that's where we get to really make an impact. As you found people struggling, maybe coming from a place of fear, maybe coming from just that place of like not knowing, right? It's just like everything.
It's ambiguity.
And where do we go? How does the work that you've done or are continuing to do help people navigate that and get to a place where they start to feel like, oh, I get this again. I know how to sort of own my life and my career and my business and move through it again.
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things that's so important is to help people understand what's triggering those feelings and those emotions, which we do as coaches, but also then to take them into a forward moving position where they take ownership of their responses to that in a positive way, which then shifts them into having confidence and courage to be able to move forward, not just spin their wheels and stand still. And so you take little granny toe steps forward. You don't have to conquer big mountains. You take little steps forward and you allow them you basically support them to do that so that they build that repertoire in their mind and their experience that they can tackle that. And the consequences are not negative. And so people are fearful of all of these things. And we need to help them see that if you want to move forward and gain control, not be controlled, gain control, then you need to look at things a little differently and allow those steps to be made. But,
yeah, it's like even beyond COVID and all that, it's like the world we live in now with sort of an onslaught of fear-based messages.
That's right.
The news is
exactly
the 24/7 news cycle, the online social media algorithms. It's all geared towards the most sensationalistic, limbic brain activation stuff. And that's not going away, right? That is our world. So I think being able to do what you're talking about, which is, okay, if that's the world and that's going to affect my personal relationships, it's going to affect how I show up at work, how, we need to find, on an individual level, you need to develop your own sort of, to use your word, infrastructure to sort of navigate that and figure out how do I react to all that multiple forms of stimuli that are coming at me and go, okay, how do I control the way I interpret and then act based off that stuff? And what do you find works with people? I mean, is there anything that you've discovered, as this experience of fear and stuff is going on for people that helps them sort of get that light bulb moment that they can be in control?
Yeah, I think, well, that's the beauty about true coaching is that we can ask very powerful, inquisitive questions that help open up the space for them to think it through. And I think you just started when people are stuck, and sometimes they don't know they're stuck. They just don't feel like they are going anywhere. Yeah. So we certainly sit back and just say, what is it that is getting in the way of you removing this thought process or this action, and how is it serving you staying here in this space? And then I sometimes, I don't use the word goals with people much because goals are more obligatory.
Yeah.
And I like to use the words, kind of a desire or an aspiration. So, where do you want to be in 6 months? If you had 3 wishes, money and time and everything is over here.
Yeah.
What would those be? And that starts them opening up their mind to be creative in where they think they want and can go. And then you start coaching through that. But people need to, a lot of times, as you have experienced, they're not even aware that they're in that state. They're just stuck and frustrated.
Absolutely.
And you are so true about the 24/7 news cycle and all the other things that are coming in all the time. People can't get away. They can't get away from that.
Yeah. And it contributes to a lot of what you're talking about too, right? Because
100%. Yes.
I love the point you bring up that you don't always know that you're in that, you're stuck. I think you are where you are. And it's like, you don't know what you don't know. And yeah, you're not progressing, but you might just think that's just how it is. And it's like, I also love that you're speaking about sort of the true coaching thing, because I think that's an interesting topic too, because some people think coaching is consulting or advice giving or mentoring.
Yes.
And it's like, it's not, at least in its pure form. And those questions of like, what is it? How is it serving you? Such a wonderful question, because it's almost like it wakes you up to the fact that you are in control, right? How is it serving you to be doing what you're doing every day, to be being who you're being every day, which is that, that deeper level we try to get to as coaches, like the who behind everything. And it's like, suddenly you're like, oh, I don't know. I don't feel like it's serving me at all. And then it's like, oh, suddenly the door opens and you can see, like, and in the workplace, I think a lot of people are feeling stuck right now. I think, and I think it's a combination of all the changes in the way we work, all of the outside influences. It can put us into a bit of a shell, protective mode, right?
Absolutely does.
I just need to deal with what's right in front of me because that's all I can deal with. But I know from my own experience, when I've worked with coaches, it's just every time it's just like another door opens, and so I love that you're sharing that perspective. And, I want to maybe pivot a little bit towards how that works when you talk about things like culture, because now you're talking more collective, right? Now it's like, I think the same thing may be true, meaning a culture may shut down a little bit. It may build up walls to protect itself. But since that's a big area of focus for you, how are you finding work cultures these days? And how are you finding it? How are you working with people to get them to see more possibility for their culture and get towards something that is a little more focused on people and growth and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's a good, first of all, if you're working with owners and leaders, they need to understand that, do they even have a culture that has gaps or doesn't have gaps? And, one of the most common quotes I hear is, our culture is just fine. And when they say that, everybody has a gap in their culture.
Right.
And so it comes in different forms, there are different levels. But so the first thing, just like with coaching, is the awareness. What is our culture? What gaps do we have? I have a simple culture checkup survey that people can go to my website and take and find out. They get immediate results, and they can find out where they think their culture is. And it has a bunch of questions, but culture really really revolves around behaviors. Yeah. And it obviously comes from the top down, but it's when you start with culture, what really are the values that started that business in the first place? What are the stories? What are the reasons? What's the core purpose? And so one of the first things I do is help people become aware that culture is a very important part of their success, and it must come from the owners and or the leaders. It's got to start there. Then they have to be willing to look. It's like looking in the mirror and saying, oh boy, we have a retention problem, or we can't hire, or we have people that leave after 6 months, or they want more money, or all these different things. Why are all those things coming up if your culture is really fine? So it's awareness. The second thing is to help them see what the gaps are. And the gaps are closed by having commonality of core values. But more than this, core values need to represent a business. Of course, we all say that. Most people have core values on the wall, in a book. Maybe they don't have them at all.
Yeah.
And they are words, but they aren't action words. And they don't have descriptive behaviors that define the core values that you expect your employees to demonstrate. Employees and leadership, by the way, everyone in the business, because it's a two-way street. So that it's really important that people understand how they connect to the core purpose of the business. And that's through this process of defining core values, but describing them through behavioral actions. And let's face it, when people come to us, no matter what the industry, they may have all the metrics and the productivity and all the things that people, that's easy. But where they run into headwinds is the behavioral competencies, the behavioral expectations, the attitudes that need to be embodied by people in the business. That's tough. And that's where this process starts to build the foundation for the culture.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about the gaps and I wonder how do you help them identify those gaps? I mean, it sounds like some of it is just getting some of the facts out there, meaning, are people leaving too soon? Is there a lot of, unproductive conflict happening?
Yes.
But is there, do you connect with the broader team on any level as part of that to kind of get
a great question.
Ground up story?
Yeah. So what we do usually in the first part, I do the first part of my program is really inquiry and discovery. So after the owner and leadership has said, yeah, we want to take this further, they've admitted that they've got gaps. So they've done the culture. Then part of that is, depending on the size, is interviewing each employee, all of the employees, and those are the discovery of, but there's also a really cool tool that's part of the work, and it's an employee survey. It's anonymous. So the employees answer a really cool survey about the culture and what it means to them, how they define it, what it looks like, and that is anonymous. So then the business owner and the leadership team can look at this and say, wow, this is what they think about how we do this or how we do that. And you start, because you have to build trust. When you start working at culture, you got to start building trust. So you start having conversations around the things that are getting in the way. And the leadership has to be open to say, oh boy. And so that's the first phase of what I do with people, but it's bringing them unaware, but you're getting input from the entire team. That's why I like working with small to medium-sized businesses. They need our work more than anything. The big corporate businesses, they have their internal people that do all those things. It's these small to medium-sized businesses that need our help. Yeah,
and there's so much room for impact, right? Because in a smaller, certainly in my experience working when I've been in a smaller place, when the culture is good, it's just about the best thing ever. But it's also very easy to tip that culture in a smaller space. One person can be kind of the poison pill.
That's right.
And so you really need leadership to not only become aware of the culture and how to sort of improve it, but how to, I want to say protect it, even though that feels like a little too defensive, but nurture it maybe is a better word, and to recognize potential threats to that culture before they start to blow up and become absolute culture killers. As you work with folks, so let's say you work with somebody, you find some gaps, you get people to get over that initial like, ugh, really, I thought we were good and now I have to think about this. And maybe they even go through the 5 stages of grief about it where they're in denial and all that stuff. But they finally go, okay, they do the work. And then do you have some process that you either provide them or check in with them to sort of give them the tools they need to continue to nurture that culture?
Yes. So I have a whole system. It's a framework, a 6-step framework.
Nice.
And yeah. And so it starts with that. We also create, and part of the infrastructure is to create a position success tool for every position. And that incorporates, it replaces the job description, but it incorporates the core values and the descriptive behaviors along with the flat out tasks and the metrics, and it's all on one page, but it creates a discussion for hiring, onboarding, and regular like quarterly engagements. I don't like annual performance reviews. I don't like job descriptions. Job descriptions are what recruiters use to say this position. That does nothing other than list some things on it. But you need business owners and leaders need tools that they can clearly define the expectations to be successful in that position. So I walk them through how to develop that, because that puts the core values, the descriptive behaviors together. Then I really work with them on how do you have regular, crucial, and meaningful, don't have to just be crucial, but conversations. How do you have one-to-one conversations? How do you have masterful conversations so that you use this tool on a regular basis? The cadence has to be regular so that people know how to provide two-way feedback, give and take, how to have candid conversations that are compassionate and caring, but truthful, but how to receive it. They need to seek, they need to demonstrate that they can receive the feedback as well as give it out. But you have to have a regular cadence of meeting with people. Then I use a tool that is has 7 key motivators so that people understand, employers, owners can find out the motivators of their employees, their key motivators. I couple it with the why. I use the why as well. I couple it with the why. And then because our why, as you and I know, it drives us, of course. But our motivators are just a tad different. And we're finding that every 3 to 4 months they change based on our needs. So sometimes it might just be about money that the employee needs. Somebody else really wants recognition, and that's huge in the literature anyway. Somebody else wants autonomy because they've got kids they have to deal with at work. So we need to understand what motivates people. We know the why is a driver, but what motivates them and what situations change that from time to time. So I use that and help them work that into their discussion and really coach leaders how to be coaches. God, there's so much good stuff in there. And I think on a broad level, what I really am impressed by there is, I think you kind of talked about this, but you're really systematizing and building a very user-friendly infrastructure for people to live the culture. Not just, like you said, put it in a book, put it on a wall, like those things could be true, but how do you make these things actionable? And that role descriptor that you're talking about just sounds so perfect to me, because I think every job description I've ever seen is it just blurs into nothing to me. I'm just like, I don't know. I know what nobody uses it.
No, not at all. And it's like, and that idea of blending. There are certain tasks that you need to do in this role, but there's also this connection to the values, and how can you demonstrate those values in this role every day? It's like, that is the missing piece for so many when they 100%. Go through values and culture exercises, it's like, yeah, I love it. Our values are to be tenacious and curious and passionate. And then like 3 days later, it's like, I got a crazy person on the phone from wanting something. And it's like, I'm not curious, I'm not passionate, and I'm not tenacious at all in that moment. Right. And
that is
like,
exactly right.
Right. And like, but if you provide me the tools to at least understand how might I show up with at least one of those values in that moment, maybe one of, can I be curious about what's going on with that customer that they might be really frustrated right now? Okay, I'm going to bring curiosity to this one, but it's not intuitive for people. It's
no.
And then I love that you then also systematize regular feedback both directions, right? Because I think, the feedback from manager to employee is sort of what we expect, right? It's like, okay, I know at some point they're going to tell me what they think I'm doing is good or not. The feedback in that other direction, even if we've read books and we've heard about the concept of 360 feedback and all that, it's still our instinct is to not do it because we want to protect ourselves. So you have to be overly curious about wanting that feedback and overly communicative about that you want that feedback, and then receive it with grace and humility, and then take action on it. Do you find that people are generally willing to do that once they go through your process?
Yes, but it takes a while because you have to build the trust first.
Yeah.
In just the interactions that occur amongst people. They say, oh yeah, I trust so-and-so to do their job and I trust them. Well, wait a minute. Let's talk about, the conversational component to that and giving and receiving. It becomes a little bit different. There's another piece to that the core values and the descriptive behaviors, TJ. And one of and this all comes from the Culture Fix Academy that I've been working with. They have a tool called the core score. And what this does is it allows, this is where the rubber meets the road, if you will. It allows a 360. So this actual score, and I hate to use the word score or rating, it's a tool that helps team members observe the descriptive behaviors of the core values. So in other words, you and I both know, okay, so you've got your core values, you've got your descriptive behaviors. So what do you do with them? If people don't abide by them, what do you do? What are the consequences? Yeah. So what this tool does is every quarter, along with the discussion, is it's an anonymous 360 where each team member looks at the descriptive behaviors for their fellow team members. And these team members, by the way, created the descriptive behaviors. So they wrote them. Yeah. So that's how it is. That's the buy-in piece. And say, okay, I did observe that in Mary Jane this month, or I observed that so-and-so comes in late, 4 out of 5 days, which is part of the respect, one of the respect core values that they have. And so they just comment on that. And when it's used, so they don't know who's commenting, it doesn't matter. That when it's used, the behavior starts to shift. Because the feedback is, we know that, and we've talked about this, that you're late 4 out of 5 days. That impacts the team, it impacts the business, it impacts your patients, it impacts whatever. And so that it's a critical component. It is like peer pressure, but it's really done in a non-threatening way. It's a feedback loop. And so I have to help the leadership. How do they deliver that message? How do they meet and share? This is what the rest of your team has observed. I hate to use the word rating, judged. It's not that. Your goal is to help infuse proper attitudes and proper behavior. And feedback from everyone can do that. Sometimes people will find that they just don't want it, can't abide by it, and they leave. Okay, well, maybe that's okay.
Yeah. It's probably best for both in that situation. Yeah. And I think a word that showed up for me when you talked about, maybe it's not peer pressure, but I hear it almost as support, right? It's like, how can we all support each other
Yes.
in continuing to live out the commitments we made to this culture, and to the
Yes.
values that we've agreed
Yep.
upon, and how
Yep.
we've talked about bringing those values to life in the work that we do. And that shift in framing from like you're being rated and pointed at and whatever to I'm supporting you, and getting people comfortable with the idea of receiving that support.
Yes.
Because again, I think our instinct can be to like get defensive. But
Yeah, of course.
if you help people draw the line from that support allows you to be better at your job and creates more opportunity for you and allows you to show up in a way that more people will recognize and value. And, assuming those things matter to you, that will work. And again, like you said, if those things don't matter to you, you may not want to be here because you're just never going to show up in a way that supports anybody. But that kind of language, I think, can take a process that can feel intimidating and make
Absolutely.
it much more unifying, which is so critical when you're talking about teams, right?
It is. And that's why learning how to use words that create conversations that matter are a critical part of that.
Yeah. And
it just is.
Yeah. And you've mentioned that idea. Like, do you coach people specifically on that? And if so, how can you, if somebody shows up and let's say they've received some feedback that the way they deliver whatever it is, whether it's feedback or instructions or anything is, or the way they engage in conflict is disruptive, let's just say, or it's received negatively. How can you work with somebody to get them to see that a better way of communicating will benefit not just the person who's frustrated, but the person who's delivering that communication?
Yeah. It's helping. So it's coaching them through the awareness piece again. So this is a biggie. This is a biggie in any business. It really is. So people need to first understand that the words they're choosing to create for that conversation, they need to realize that the person in the other side is receiving it a certain way. Now, granted, some people just can't receive any kind, no matter what. But it's helping them understand. And this came from another certification on conversational intelligence. That's really what helped, because it's the neuroscience and what happens to our brain and conversation and a bunch of other things. But when I usually share that information with people ahead of time so they understand what creates distrust and what creates trust in conversations. And then, and what type of conversations lead to distrust and what words to trust. So we craft conversations, honestly, around those things. And yes, in tone, body language, facial, all these other things. Yes, we know those are all important, but people don't even know where to start sometimes in conversations because they go into a session or a meeting biased and triggered already. So what words come out are not where the conversation they wanted it to go. So I help them actually write scripting for conversations. So we practice conversations. They create scenario. Part of the work is creating scenarios or bringing scenarios to the coaching. I do group coaching as well, and they bring those.
Nice.
And then we create scripting that they can take back and use. And then they gradually start to create and bring those into our coaching session. And we coach around that. So people know what it's like to have a conversation that was easy. That was successful. I don't know why I didn't do that ahead of time. Well, it's because you didn't have the tools.
Well, yeah, right. And I think, we learn how to talk to people through just years of being spoken to and speaking to people.
That's right.
And we don't necessarily get super good at learning what's effective and what's not, right? We just
Right.
Or when something isn't effective, our instinct is to blame the other person and think that they're not hearing me the way they should be hearing me.
Correct.
So I love that conversational intelligence language. I think already that just opens something when you hear that. And then the idea of scripting, I think some people might be like, oh my gosh, I have to script what I have to say. But then it's like, it's almost like you're rewiring those neurons so that when that conversation opportunity shows up down the road, now it's more natural for you to speak in the way that is going to be more beneficial for everyone involved.
You bring up an excellent point, TJ, because people often, when I do these in workshops, people often say, well, isn't the script unauthentic? It's not genuine. And I can see where they're coming from that. But in order to shift how we respond, we have to be intentional. And in order to be intentional, we have to practice how we and visualize how we might want that to go. And so writing it down helps. That is a process that I use and that helps. Some people might talk into a dictaphone or a microphone. Dictaphone's an old thing, isn't it? Okay, showing my age here. But they, whatever avenue they use, you have to be intentional about practicing it to make it a habit. Just do.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And I think, it's funny because when I was thinking like, do I do this? And I don't always write it down, although once in a while I will. But I do tend to I play out scenes in my head. My inner monologue becomes an inner dialogue with whomever I might be talking to. And I just and the first few drafts are not great. I fall into the patterns that create the lack of trust. And it's like you get that sort of bitterness that comes out. And then it's like, well, I don't want that conversation. And then you hopefully work your way through it where you go, well, maybe if I come at it this way, it can work better. And it also made me come back to you're talking about the why earlier. And for those who are listening who may not be familiar with it, it's just this wonderful discovery tool to, help you find your why. You might be familiar with Simon Sinek and his whole thing about finding your why. And this tool is just like, I don't know, what is that? The why part of it's only like 5 or 6 minutes. I think it's super quick. And you discover your why. And it's not maybe what you think, because you might be thinking the why is some grand purpose, like to cure some disease or something. And it's like, no, your why is kind of like how you show up in the world and what really is your prime driver as a person. And, for me, mine is make sense. And I'm just driven to solve problems and, take things that feel complicated and find a way to have them make sense. And I find it's a really useful conversation sharpening tool as well for people to have that insight into what your teammates are driven by, because when I might meet somebody who's, maybe they're driven, more of a right way person, and they're really driven by things like, this is how we do it. This is how we've always done it. But I might go, well, that way doesn't make sense to me. And they might be like, well, who cares? It works. And I'd be like, yeah, but it doesn't make sense. And then we're just going to butt heads. But at least if we know that about each other, it's like, okay, I can be like, you like that it works. I like things that work too. Do you mind if I offer up some thoughts I have on other things that might work? And it just at least, and then when there's resistance, you get it. So I think that can be a wonderful tool. And there's other assessments that can help in that way too. But I think understanding where somebody's coming from at just a very foundational level can be such a powerful beginning to becoming better at talking with the people on your team. Have you found that with the why?
100%. And, it's one of the teams, particularly I'm working with in Arizona. They have until this week, they had one right way person on there. And she's probably eventually going to be the office manager, but and it was this way, this way, this way. She's also better. She's a better way. How? Yeah. And so it created some angst and a little bit of resistance in the team until we did the matrix. So the whole team, for those of you listening, we do a team matrix. So we create everybody's why, how, and what, and we had a discussion around it. Now they make they joke about it.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, there Christine goes again, because she is the right way.
Right.
And she is by the book. Okay, well, that's okay for what she does. And so, and somebody else asks a ton of questions. Well, they're clarified. And and so it's really nice, because this is a team that has 72% of their top 3 whys are trust. I have never seen that before.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
It is fascinating.
Yeah. I love the matrix, because I think that's the eye-opening moment where and it's eye-opening both in like, oh, that person's that person's that, but then you do get the sense of like, what is our makeup? And then as a leader, you get a chance to go like, one, if that's my makeup now, how do I best sort of leverage everyone's why to get them motivated and excited? And maybe bigger picture, do I have the right mix of whys? Certain businesses you might be like, I've only got one right way. I need 10 right ways. We've got a lot of process and we need to have that done. Others, it might be like we have 10 right ways, and it's like a really creative business that just needs people to be thinking of better ways or simplifying things or making sense. And it's like, we might need to rethink that, or at least rethink who does what. And that's the other thing I think you can come out of, right? It's like, let's lean into this person's right way. Let's lean into this person's trust more and think a little bit more about how their roles are defined to potentially tap into their strength and what really drives them.
Yes. And I think it really has helped the teams. I've done it with a couple of teams on a regular basis, and we keep the conversation going in the team coaching sessions. And I'll always weave things into it so they can always discuss those pieces, and they just get to this is a tight-knit team, and it's really interesting to see how they've changed some of their dynamics by incorporating that into it. And people, like we talk about, people think, oh, just another assessment. They need to realize it's not an assessment. It is a tool about what drives them that most people don't know.
Yeah. Or you know it, but you can't articulate it. Meaning you feel it. And that's kind of where I was like, as soon as I saw it make sense, it made sense. It was like, but if somebody said, what's your why? I never would have said make sense.
No,
so it's giving you the language, which when you talk about having conversations, like it's all about having the right language to use at the right time. And I think that's the beauty of a tool like that, is it gives you that language. And then I love some of that conversational intelligence stuff where it's like, now you're really breaking it down into, in this conversational situation, what language do I need to bring to the table, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. And TJ, I think the biggest thing that is so different about some of the work that, coaches do or that I'm doing is it's not, I can write and talk all day about this is what you need to do. This is how you need to do it. People need to have practical applications. They need to be able to have something that they can use on a regular basis that's easy, applicable, understandable, and effective. And I think that's what we're missing so much when we talk about, oh, these are the tools you need to do. These are the 10 steps, how you do it. That kind of, that's fine. But if people don't know how to implement it or don't have the practice or the support to implement it, it doesn't become part of their daily activity.
Fully agree with that. I feel like it's like when you hear a great speaker or something and you come away just filled with all the endorphins and I'm going to change everything. But if there was no takeaway for you to then like tools to actually implement and activate it in your life or work or whatever, by within a week, you're just back to doing what you're doing. And that was like, that's just a cool talk you listened to, That's right. That is right. Yeah. So I think it's really wonderful the way you are building that infrastructure for people, because that's like, it's probably 80% of the work. And I think as coaches, we can spend a lot of time in that 20% of the thinking and the pondering and the coming up with insights, which are critical. But without that activation standpoint, things don't happen. Things don't change. Things don't grow.
Nope.
Yeah.
No, they don't. No.
Yeah. I one other thing that I know you are doing a bit of is speaking. And I just wanted to get a sense of how does that complement what you're doing in the sort of coaching world? How does that help you, bring a message to people and activate them in a different way?
Yeah, that's another good question. I love speaking because I like interactive speaking. So when I speak either at a conference or with the team, and I like educating, but I like engaging the audience. So, and because it kind of goes along with what we've been talking about, is getting people to be able to see and visualize themselves doing it. Not just, oh, that's a great idea. Okay, now what do I do with it? They need to be able to visualize themselves doing it, which is the first step. So speaking for me helps share the energy level, the concepts. I like to create aha moments for people. And I'm kind of an outside of the box person, so I will challenge them from that standpoint. But I use the coaching concepts of asking questions we do not have the answers to. I ask those during my speaking engagements.
Nice.
Because I think, I like to. It's just, for me, it's got to be interactive. I don't like talking at people. Yes, part of speaking is that, because you're educating depending on the venue. But I really like motivating people to really think, okay, I can visualize how this might work.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like that it connects very much to the process of your coaching, where it's both the insight and the information, but then, like you said, it allows you to step into it and start to mentally at least build the muscles that you're going to need to go do the thing.
That's right.
Yeah. I love that. Is there anyone, I'm obviously focused on desuckifying work, and I think about, that's part of the whole reason for this podcast, is just bringing on people who are doing these wonderful things. Is there anybody out there in the world that you've seen or connected to that you think, people need to be aware of because they're doing really cool stuff in this desuckification space?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. There's a ton of motivational speakers for sure. I think I can name, obviously a lot of people know about John Maxwell's work. A lot of people know about Simon Sinek's work and the work that he's a motivational guy. Another person I really like, because she helps pull together some pieces with receiving feedback, is Kim Scott with Radical Candor.
Oh yeah.
And the conversational intelligence piece is the Creating We Institute is really nice, because it gives people a framework to master and understand conversations. It's not just communication. So that's not really people. The two founders have now passed, but the organization is still very much alive. And so that's going well. But oh gosh, I could list so many of them. And there's motivational folks, and there's people who have crafted different strategies and tactics. There's so many good people out there. And I think just reading and listening and learning from others is really critical. We never stop learning.
I agree. Yeah. Kim Scott's an interesting one. I've heard a couple of her talks on it. It's one of those ones that at first, again, it sounds a little intimidating. Radical candor. It's like, oh.
My teams love that.
Yeah.
But it's how it's presented to them.
Yeah.
And how they can use it. It really helps both sides. It helps those who have to give, and it helps those who have to receive.
Yeah, it seems like it would all be in the framing, right? Because I think, and I think it all has to start with somebody having a growth mindset and knowing that there's room for improvement. And then it's like, well, this is a key, having those candid conversations, and like you said, constructively and with grace, and with you don't have to be harsh to be candid, but you do have to be truthful and giving people the space and the tools to do that, even if that does mean scripting it out and getting your words together and being like, okay, I want them to know this. These are the words I need to use, because otherwise they're going to hear it in a way that they just block it. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what's really important, I think. It really works well. So those are the people that come to mind, obviously right away.
And I think when we share this, we can add to the list, on LinkedIn and stuff, and just think of anybody else. But I'm just always curious, who people are inspired by. And I love the conversational intelligence world. I think that is something that I think a lot of people will be like, I don't know if I have that where I need it to be right now. I want to explore that, because I think we all know we can be better at it.
Oh, and people ask me, what's the difference between conversational intelligence and emotional intelligence? So conversational intelligence is think of an umbrella, and emotional intelligence sits under that as well, because that's a very specific component of conversational intelligence, but it's much more, CIQ is much more broad than that.
Yeah, I can picture that. And I don't know, it's got my curiosity, to bring up one of the words we've used here a few times. My curiosity is piqued by that. Another question I ask a lot of folks is, how optimistic are you about the state of work? I started by asking, what do you think we are? Are you optimistic about where we're headed?
I'm the eternal optimist, but but I also have to be, practical and realistic. I think so much of the conversation that now comes into play is this AI thing, and AI is changing not only maybe how we work, it's changing, and it has the potential to change how we live. And I'm not saying that all in a positive way. One thing, though, that AI for me does not replace the connection, the human connection that is necessary for us to have.
Yeah.
You cannot, you can mimic it, you can make it look like that because they're already doing it, but it's just, there's no meaning there. And granted, I use AI to help create some content and some words and things to give me ideas. But it cannot replace, it is in many cases replacing the work that humans do. And so to answer your question, I think, I'm old as dirt. So, I have a different impression of work ethic that some other people might have. And so I think going forward, work is all about attitude, interest, and I think what's happened in a lot of the younger folks is they don't have a purpose. They don't know their purpose. They're not connected to anything.
Yeah.
I think that's a problem.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's hard, right? Because first off, I agree with you completely about AI in the sense that it will never replace human connection. And if we allow it to just mimic it and we don't have human connection, that's a doomsday scenario to me. But I think the 100%. Good news is it's in our power, meaning we're the humans here. We're the ones who are contributing to this. And we do have the ability to hopefully, squeeze out all the benefit that we can out of it, because there is a lot of positive upside. And really just continue to remind ourselves and demonstrate the value of human connection, and perhaps even see how can AI create more space for human connection, and can it create more space for work that truly relies on human connection, as opposed to just kind of crunching stuff and doing the more mechanical stuff. Can we allow ourselves to really show up at work and have that meaningful work? And then I think on the purpose front, I think, what's interesting when, I think as generations change, there's so much more possibility. The avenues you can pursue in life from even 20 years ago have exponentially grown. And so it's like, it's like when, you go to the supermarket and you're overwhelmed by all the choices and you just want to almost walk away and be like, I'm not getting anything. It's like, I think that might be happening for some people. It's like, there's so many things I could do. How could I possibly zero in on something and then really allow myself to connect to that and develop a passion for it? Where I think, certainly for me growing up, like there were a handful of avenues and you found them and it was just, okay, this is where I'm at. And I get, and you discover your purpose and your purpose grows. So it's that, the illusion of choice sometimes is actually, can harm us in some ways. And it's like, how do we create focus, and how do we, like that's a big challenge. It's like, how do we focus in the world today? How do we know where to put our attention? And I even coming back to that word of intention, it's like being really intentional with our time and our humanity is what I think will get us through some of these challenges,
Yes. And I think there's a reason that all these different things are happening, because we need to step back and say, wait a minute, what's really important? I
agree. Fully agree with that. And I think, just to kind of piggyback on this conversation here, like we've kind of touched on it, but I like to ask people, like, if you could just wave the magic wand and work was fully desuckified, I'm out of a job and it's a perfect work world. What does that look like to you?
In a perfect work world?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's probably idealistic, isn't it? I think where people, and honestly, I think people need to be more respectful, more humble, more grateful, and get their nose out of their navel. They need they need to be looking at, what can I do to help others, not just myself. It's serving others. Now, that's hard. But the research is really very strong that when we give ourselves to others and serve others, or we volunteer or do something, it changes our outlook. It changes how we approach things. So, but this is a whole nother podcast, because this talks about, parenting and support systems, and what's important. Family values and tradition are being torn.
Yeah. I think it's, again, that there's a lot there, but I think that notion of, getting your nose out of your navel, I love that metaphor, because it's funny, because in the work we do as coaches, we are helping people sort of understand themselves. But to me, the only point of understanding yourselves is so that you can then understand those around you better and connect with them better.
Yes.
However we can support that effort, whether it's as coaches or, like you talk about, parents and teachers and all the different infrastructure that we have to help people recognize, take care of yourself, know yourself, understand yourself, but don't allow yourself to either think too much of yourself, or I think the other side is when you feel fearful, you do withdraw. And then all you're doing is looking at yourself, and you become obsessed, and all those bad habits come about. So giving people avenues to come out of that, to show themselves to other people, connect with other people, is super critical. And I again, like you said, another podcast where we can begin to touch on that one. But I think those are wonderful ways of looking at making work better, just getting to some of those core fundamental values that, I think it's interesting. They're so simple, but they'll scrub away a lot of the complexity that appears to be in front of us. If you can just focus on some of that stuff,
That is very well said, for sure. And I think, in social media and those particular platforms have destroyed, honestly, the ability to connect.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, you have to really work on platforms to find ways to connect. And it's taken me a long time to feel like those platforms are serving me instead of me sort of serving them. And that full circle back to that notion, like we want to be doing things that serve us. We want to be doing things that allow us to free us to be who we can be.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I like to end things on a slightly lighthearted note. We're digging into some deep stuff here, Judy.
Yeah, we are.
Think, I've been asking people to contribute sound effects because, as you've heard, I use sound effects throughout, my intros, and I'm a big cat guy, and I do all this goofy stuff. Do you have anything you'd like to share to add to the library?
Yes, and so can you share? Can you share your screen with me, and I'll share it? Is that okay?
Let's see if I can do that. So there's a visual with it as well?
No, it's just the sound. I don't know. Yeah,
why don't we try it? Why don't we try it and see? I'll tell you if it's coming through.
I don't think it will. So let's do this. Okay, so let me try this. Okay.
Anything coming through?
Yeah, I can hear it, but you can't see.
yeah, it's not. I was just checking my audio settings, but I don't see. Well,
you have to do a share. You have to do a share screen with a share sound, and then I play it.
All right, here we go.
It's a purring. Okay, it's a purring cat.
Here we go. I put the screen sharing up. I don't know if that includes sound or not, but
let's double check and see. I don't want to take your time, but let's just see if we can
give it another shot.
I don't. Okay. I don't think it's going to. Oh, wait a minute. Here we go. There it is. Sorry. There we go. Okay, now. Okay, here we go. You can't hear it.
No, I can't. It's really weird. And I'll
weird.
So
let me try.
I'll ask you.
Let me try it one more time.
With the screen share on. Yeah, let's see how this goes.
Okay, let's try it one more time, and then I don't want to take a value.
Oh, there we go. Well, that's very soothing. I like that. I don't want to put you on the spot. I wish I was like, can I make that sound? Sounds like it's such a hard sound to make.
I can send you the little. I'll send you the little recording if that's a lot easier.
Yeah, please do. But as a cat person, I love. There's almost no sweeter sound than the sound of a cat purring. I think they've actually quantified that it actually lowers our blood pressure when we hear the sound of a cat purring.
That's interesting. Yeah, I really like it too. And so I love cats. We don't have any, but I love them. And the purring, you're right, it does. So,
I don't know what it is, but it's just, it's right at that perfect frequency that it just gets you. The only other question I want to ask is, I want people to have a chance to know how to find you and learn more about what you're doing in the world. So what are the best places to find you online?
Yeah, well, LinkedIn.
Yeah.
If they go to my Facebook page, I don't even go there.
Okay.
I don't. Yeah. So my LinkedIn is just my first and last name. They can also email me. Or they could go to my website if they'd like to look at that as well. It's growstrongteams.com. Growstrongteams.com.
Awesome. I love that. Well, Judy, this has been a really wonderful conversation. I appreciate the perspective you bring, and you've definitely set off a lot of light bulbs in my brain around operationalizing some of this work, right? And not just talking about it, but bringing it to the floor and allowing it to be lived and not just thought about. And I think that's such an important step. And I think a lot of people listening will appreciate that.
I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. It
Awesome.
was really a lot of fun. So thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thanks, Judy. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the DesuckifyWork Podcast. And thanks to Judy for being an eye-opening and curiosity-sparking guest. You can follow Judy on LinkedIn and visit her site at growstrongteams.com. I'm looking to grow my own strong team here at the Pudding Factory. So if you'd like to connect, collaborate, or create something magical together, let's talk. I'll put a link in the show notes if you'd like to set something up. See you next time, everyone. Bye.